Hey guys, Eddie Speed here with Note School. Mitch Stephen, my old buddy from way back in the 90s, who is a seller finance giant, interviewed me on his podcast. And in this interview, we were obviously talking about a lot of different things, and that's what this is Mitch's interview with me that he loaned us the tape to put on our YouTube channel. And you can tell as the interview unfolds, we start discovering some things that while Mitch is seasoned over 3,000 seller finance transactions, you could see it really unfold as to some of these ideas, particularly this tax loophole strategy, and how you could get a seller to carry terms because he could really take advantage of the loophole of avoiding paying capital gains now, and he could defer it over a long period of time. So listen to this. Mitch is a great guy. I love the dude to death. And I think you'll enjoy the interview. And thank you, Mitch, for sharing it. For allowing us to put it on Note School's YouTube channel. And hope you guys enjoy it. See you later.
This is Mitch, and welcome to the 1000 Houses podcast. I'm on with Eddie Speed. This man is an icon in the note buying business across the nation. He has been for a long time. I think it's been around 40 years, Eddie. Is that right? I don't want to make you feel old, but man, that's some experience right there.
Yeah, a day or two, right?
Yeah, over 40,000 notes representing about $3.5 billion. I mean, if you do the math, 40 years, 40,000 notes, 10,000 notes a year average through the highs and the lows. There was years there where it was pretty dry. So that's like everything else. You know, it doesn't come in on an average. It goes for a while little, and then it just heaps on top of you, and you've got to make sure your infrastructure is ready to handle it. So, you know, maybe that's a good thing to do when you're in the slow periods, is go back and work on your infrastructure because it's getting ready to flood. It's like the farmers around here say, if it doesn't rain until September this year, then it's going to flood in September, you know, so better get ready. So how are you today, my friend?
Mitch, I'm good. We have, it would not surprise you, our phone has kind of been ringing off the hook because the traditional real estate investor who has not really needed creative financing very much, all of a sudden is figuring out that that's something he needs a clear definition of.
Absolutely. We go way back. Well, 2000 or before even, I think 1996 or 7 or 8. And we've been through a lot of cycles, right? We went through the recession, and then we went through COVID. You know, we're still standing. That says a lot. Anybody who's still standing after those major events. How do you weather those tough times?
Well, I think you said a lot of things. I mean, you have to be prepared for it. I think the first thing right now, Mitch, is mental. You know, I work with a lot of vendors that work with active real estate investors, you know, fractional CFOs, companies that do, you know, business management implementation, guys that do coaching for negotiations. And within those vendors, very comfortably to say probably literally all of the top 1,000 house buyers, right, or clients of multiple of those vendors or some of those vendors. And so I spend a lot of time kind of talking to them about what do your clients need? What are they feeling? You know, talked to your partner, Mitch, very recently, and was talking about the same thing. Like,
you mean Mike? You're talking to my partner, Mike?
You're Mitch. I've only known you almost 30 years. Yeah. I'm talking to your partner, Mike. And, and so we're talking about, you know, like, this is what I'm trying to get a sense of right now is I know, Mitch, you and I know what they need to help them, but it may not be the first thing that we do because they're a little bit scared of like learning something too complex. And so how do you go learn something simple to start out and then lead to something that could be a little more, you know, creative?
Let's talk about that creative side. I mean, that's how I've managed to survive, because I just keep morphing. If it's not working, you gotta shift. For the longest time, you know, before we were really good at raising private money, we're trying to get these sellers to finance us the properties, and we were going about it all wrong for many years, right?
Yeah. Well, everything
Yeah.
we've tried, Mitch, people say, how do you come up with this idea? Well, it wasn't the first idea. I mean, you and I've talked about the tax strategy. Well, I mean, believe me, that wasn't my first approach of trying to get somebody to carry terms and seller finance me when I'm buying from them. I didn't think of the tax angle. It just one little piece at a time ties together. And after you do something for a long period of time, then the solution you come up with sounds really simple, but it's not the first idea.
Yeah. Always evolving, always changing, shifting, trying new things. How do you describe your business right now? Who is Eddie Speed right now today? I mean, we've been a lot of things over the years. Where are your focuses?
So Mitch, we really have, we have a real estate investing business that typically kind of ends up being a joint venture with other investors in various ways. I have a very active land business that you're very aware of. I've been in the land business for over 30 years. I did a lot of land deals down in South Texas. I used to fly to San Antonio, come by your office and see you, and drive clear to the border. And we were selling land tracts on the border, Eagle Pass and all down in there, Uvalde. And so I've been doing that a long time. How did I meet those guys? I met those guys because they created owner finance notes, and they would end up at my doorstep with those notes. And we would figure out a way to work together, even at the point of buying the land and reselling it. And then, so I ended up doing that a lot with real estate investors. And then I have a very active land business up here doing a similar thing. The truth of the matter is, the land guys that I partner with, they don't really need me. I'm just glad they like me, because they are plenty capable of doing all of it by themselves. But I work a lot with real estate investors right now. At the moment, let's just go back a little bit, Mitch. So what had happened in the house buying business was a very unique scenario. By, call it, March of this year, probably 80% of the biggest 500 house buyers, that house that they were wholesaling was ending up on Wall Street with Wall Street money. Literally 80%. And you're saying, why is that true? Because Wall Street was paying $1.10 of value. Now, on the surface, that sounds a little crazy, but they had a strategy where they were renting it and securitizing the rental, and they could make math work that the average person couldn't make work. I guess they say they could. But anyway, all that's happened, Mitch. Then the market started going sideways. Apparently, Mitch, there's a problem. Apparently, you can't buy a house at a 4 cap in a 7 rate market.
I never figured out how they were buying these houses with a $3,000 margin, with all the things all the unknowns and all the variables. I just didn't understand how that was even going to work. I just thought they were gambling on the odds, of something.
When you're a bond house and you're securitizing, you make a lot of money putting it into the security. So there's a lot of upfront that they make, and the average person can't make that, but the bond house can. And if you're asking me their motivation in doing it, it's pretty clear to me. It's the reason they did mortgage-backed securities back 2000, in the early 2000s, right? Finally, they securitized all the good paper, and then they had to start working on bad paper, and we saw where that led us. But what's happened, Mitch, is Wall Street has totally pulled back. Like, I talked to what I believe are the biggest operators in the business that were selling to these groups, and they say basically all the Wall Street money has left. So now all of a sudden you've got essentially a corporate buyer that was paying retail plus, which meant if you were wholesaling, you didn't have to go buy it at a very deep discount in order to make a good spread. And so, they hit the easy button. And then the other thing is the other buyers that were typically buying from real estate investors, if you were flipping houses, is these were not the old season landlords. Mitch, the guys that you know that own 50 rentals, they haven't been aggressively buying in the last 2 years. The guys that were buying in the last 2 years are a smaller operator trying to get in the game, right? And what's happened is, and once again, people confuse mortgage rates and the Fed rates, right? So the Fed controls what they lend money to banks. And that's what we hear about. The Federal Reserve is raising the Fed rate and so forth and so on. That's the rate that they charge to license banks. Mortgage rates are bond driven. It's just bond trading. And so the biggest investor of these bonds for a good long period of time has been the government. The biggest buyer of buying these long-term mortgage bonds, essentially what drives mortgage rates, was the government. Well, they've pulled back. And so right now we have kind of a weird situation where sometimes, Mitch, 1 week or two, somebody will come in with a big amount of dry cash and just buy in the market. And people are like, oh yeah, you see that? Mortgage rates are going down. And then all of a sudden, boom, they spike back up. And then people are like, oh, wait a minute, I thought mortgage rates were going down. So I have a friend that works for a big Wall Street firm. They manage mega billions. And he's a friend. He's a hunting buddy, Mitch. Like, if you're a hunting buddy, that's the closest, right?
That's the closest, yeah. They tell all the secrets after a couple of shots of bourbon and campfire. You get down to what's really going on.
So he's helpful to me, and they spend a lot of money, like call it millions of dollars, hiring analytics firms to study all these things. So the trend kind of looks like this, right? The trend of the Wall Street firms, not somebody on Facebook that's got a hot sports opinion, but it looks like we are going to see mortgage rates with an increase. Now, there may be dips at a moment, but an increase up probably through the first quarter of next year, maybe tailing off around February. Probably capping out, this is what they say, capping out at somewhere around 7.5 to 7 3/4. And then we're going to see a slide back in rates, probably of around to 1% slide. So call it 6.5. And that is for what they see for the foreseeable future. So Mitch, this 2 or 3% mortgage thing that we got so used to, call it over.
Yeah, and I think that's what's causing a little bit of the lull in the house sales right now, is people are trying to get over the sticker shock. They're thinking they don't know what to do now. They used to be able to afford a $350,000 house. Now they're gonna have to bring that number down. Two things
got to happen, right? Two things have to happen. Rates have to drop, or prices have to drop. Because at the new mortgage rate, we've hit an unaffordability crisis. We had an unaffordability crisis, Mitch, back in June, and rates hadn't even quite got to 6%. And yet there was all these reports showing the affordability factor and how the people couldn't afford to buy a house. And that's because we kind of built the housing market pricing based on artificially low rates.
Yeah, there's never been a time like that in history where rates were so low. Remember the days when they were 18% in the Carter years and 70s, and
here's a fun fact. You know what the average long-term mortgage interest rate is over the last 50 years?
I'm going to guess like around 8%, but I'm just guessing.
That's a heck of a good guess. 7.7. That is a great guess.
Well, because they were really high for some years, but then they really didn't stay low all that long compared to the chart you're looking at, So what does this do for the seller financiers out there? What are they thinking? I can tell you what I'm thinking.
Well, there's a theory, Mitch, and this theory pretty much always proves to be true. when conventional lending is very aggressive, either with cheap money or, loose money, right? Not very good underwriting. We saw loose money in 2008. We saw cheap money last year, right? When that happens, there's not much of a need for seller financing. Conventional lending is solving the biggest problems in the industry. There's no gap to fill. There's no void to go fill in, right? When the mortgage industry, on the other hand, is not filling the gap, there is a scarcity. And what there's a scarcity of now is not a scarcity of available money, although the mortgage underwriting is continuing to get tighter. But the scarcity is the cost of money. In other words, it's not affordable. And when you see that, Mitch, you look at trends over time and you're saying, when was the most seller financing created? If you looked at historically over the past 20 or 30 years, you can almost say, the mortgage industry had a problem. Seller financing doubled. Look over here, 8 years later, the mortgage industry had a big problem. Seller financing doubled. So that's generally the pattern. And of course, you and I probably, I don't know, hadn't asked you, but I assume that's what we're both thinking right now is seller financing is going to fill the gap conventional lending doesn't fill.
Yeah. So, but even in the good times, Eddie, this is just my personal experience. I don't know across the country. I happen to live in a state and a city where, probably had some of the most affordable, nice housing in the planet for years and years and years. I was very blessed to be in this place at the time that I arrived on the real estate scene. But I never had any trouble really seller financing my houses. I average like 4 or 5 days on the market, maybe 9 days sometimes. Because do you have any statistics on how many people can't qualify for a new loan?
Sure. Yeah, so the Mortgage Bankers Association keeps a chart called the Mortgage Availability Index. So let me just give you some. So this index measures all these variables. We won't get into what all the variables were, but before the virus started, call it February of 2020. Okay, that index was at 185. Today, that index is right around 115. So that means that they have tightened up who can get a mortgage. And that index doesn't measure who can afford it. That's just simply underwriting standards, assuming your income compared to your payment is in line.
Yeah, and you've had time on the job and you check all the boxes, documented income or, all that stuff. But there seems to be a million reasons why people who can afford it, who can't get a loan, still are out there looking for the houses. And so it brings me to this next topic. People are telling me, or the theory is out there, that they don't really see how house prices can drop because we still have a shortage of houses. Like in San Antonio the other day, it was 30 days worth of houses on the MLS. That's all there was. Yeah. But that's one theory, but the rates are going up. So how do those two theories, when the rates go up, people are gonna, have to drop the prices of their houses. How do those two theories collide? What happens when those two theories collide?
Mitch, if you would have called me 18 months ago, and 18 months ago, I started in 1980. So 18 months ago, I'd been in the business at least 40 years. Okay. If you'd have called me 18 months ago and you'd have said, Eddie, what is the strongest indication of real estate values? What's the pattern you've always noticed? The one common thread? And I would have said to supply and demand, right? I think most people with any experience would say supply and demand is your most strongest indicator. If you call me today and you said, Eddie, what is the strongest indicator of value? I would say affordability. Because what's happened is we've put ourselves in a weird situation. Now, Mitch, our friends here in Texas and East are sort of operating with those old guys are crazy. There's no way real estate's going to go down in value. Call people out west. Call people in Boise. Call people in San Diego. Call people in Phoenix. Ask them. I just talked to a guy in Phoenix last night. I was sort of preparing for this interview today. I called a student. There's a high volume guy. He's dropping 100. He was dropping 100,000 pieces of mail a month. So I think he's got a fairly big perspective of the market. Okay. And he says, Eddie, I had a house that I put under contract in April for $575. He said it was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in Tempe, Arizona, where the college is, blah, blah, blah. He said, and I had it flipped to an investor for $625. I was going to make 50 grand. Said the investor called me and says, I'm out. Don't want to buy it. So there was a cycle time. He says, I don't want to buy it. And he says, so I thought, well, no big deal. I've got a big buyers list. People are wearing me out. He says, I used to could put an offering out and have 25 investors go look at the house and pay me more than I offered for it 100% of the time. He said, I sent it out at $550, called the seller that we told him that things had really changed and I needed to see what I could do, but I knew I was going to have to adjust the price. He said, I re-offered this property to my closest network of investors at $550. He said, I couldn't get a single response. He said, I thought I'd just be wild and just try something and see, because I thought I would sort of start an army in the front yard wanting to buy. He said, I made the initial offering to my investor group at $475, $100,000 below what I bought it for at a wholesale price a few months ago. He said, I got 2 people to call me and they weren't willing to go out and look at it.
So he was trying to cause a frenzy in the front yard and they would drive the prices up and then he'd go over what he had in it, but it didn't turn out that way.
And when I started the conversation with him, I said, how do you feel out there? He said, well, I don't see a big drop in price. I said, really? That's interesting. He said, no, it's weird. He said, it's the weirdest I've ever seen. He said, it is totally cold. It's like a ghost town out here. But he said, I don't see a big drop in price. And I said, really, that's interesting. Why do you say that? So we went through all this kind of how he was feeling about it. And I led him up to this conversation. Now, when he got done with the conversation, I said, and you say there's no chance of a price drop? I said, you just run your own experiment. Now, there was only on one house and one deal, and maybe everybody was on vacation or who knows. But the idea is, Mitch, that this is when creative financing becomes such a tool because there's so many different things that you can do with it. Obviously, the landlord strategy, landlords owned a house, like pretty much every high volume guy, let's say the top 1,000 house buyers, right? Top 1,000 guys in the business, they're all making a living doing it. And they're doing a certain amount of volume, some more, a lot more than others, but they're all doing it. And they all would say that the most motivated sellers they find are landlords because they don't like managing the rental. They figured out it's a way more of a job. And they didn't know how to do it. Their call flow is all up. Pretty much right now, at the moment, people saying their call flow is about double of what it was, call it in February. So
what do you mean by call flow?
The response rate, they're doing marketing and they're getting their response rate is literally that much more. But guess what the problem is? The sellers are calling them wanting yesterday's pricing. Surprise, surprise. So this is where the guys that we're working with are like, okay, now I need to know how to make creative offers to make part of the price of that property, call it with monopoly money and not real cash. Some kind of a creative structure it's a price on the closing statement, but the way you're paying it back, it's almost monopoly money.
Okay, so in layman's terms, you're saying you can pay the high price if you can get some favorable terms. You can offset the price.
And it doesn't have to be all of the deal. Maybe you just got them to carry a piggyback second with no interest and no payments and do way out in the future. And you can keep that deal on the property, even if you flip it to somebody else and they just take over the financing that you structured. There's all kind of ways to do it where people always think, well, the landlord has to carry all the financing for me, and that's the only way it can be done. And the answer is that's not true. And And so, Mitch, if we're having this conversation in January of this year, right? Look back a little bit. Most people in the house flipping business are like, oh my God, this gives me a headache. I don't want to learn this. But now, guess what? They're showing up. They're showing up for these workshops and things that we do, and they say, tell me more. So here's what I like about it. They are willing to reinvent themselves. They have to see that they need to reinvent themselves. That's pretty much become evident. So with that being said, they're saying, okay, well, I didn't need to know creative financing. Now I'm willing to learn it. So we got a new generation coming along, Mitch, and there's some old dogs like us that have been doing it a long time, and we get the chance to help them.
Yeah. So I want to mention the book that you have. Tell us a little bit about your book, and then I'm going to give a link here in a little bit how to get a copy of it.
Well, the book is about buying on terms, right? It's how do you buy with creative financing? So it's a nice book. It's got a good opening and about 6 chapters, and every chapter is a different way it could be done. So it's just some good examples. It's an easy read. It's not going to take somebody forever to read it. Along with that, I'm going to give them a little workshop. So I'm going to like introduce an idea to them. And this workshop's pretty cool, Mitch, because it introduces the idea of a tax strategy that most real estate investors have never considered. I'm going to say I pretty much have brought this to the market. And it's so simple. You're thinking, surely people have been doing this for years. A landlord has a unique strategy where it's very possible that they never have to pay capital gains tax if they're willing to carry payments over a period of time. See, you stretch out your payments, you stretch out when you get your capital gain, and in most cases, capital gains tax doesn't start until you make a certain amount of capital gains in any one year. When you don't start paying capital gains tax at the first dollar in capital gains you earn. You have to get to a certain threshold, and then above that, you pay capital gains tax. So you're kind of taking a couple of tax laws and tying them together. And it's something that the guy selling the properties, it's probably his number one concern is paying taxes, but he's never thought about how to do it. And he's never had anybody show him that was possible.
Yeah. So the other thing good about landlords is they're used to taking payments. They understand the collateral. Exactly. They're used to getting payments. They really, would like to see a cash flow going, especially if they're 70 years old or, up in years. They say, well, I'll be able to ride this out for the next 20 years or whatever. So now whether your note really goes that long, it just depends on how things are written. But I like that about landlords. You don't have to explain a first lien position to them. You don't have to explain what their rights are if they don't get paid as agreed. They understand all this already. What they probably really don't understand is how to avoid the big tax hit from a cash sale or a new loan sale. And then you're saying, go in and sit down with them and say, prices here or there, I'm okay there, but have you considered what this is going to do to you income tax wise if you just take it all and then start to back into showing them how they might avoid that big hit? And then in essence, you're kind of setting yourself up, or you are setting yourself up for them to let their light bulb go off. You're trying to get them to come to the conclusion through your coaching that you probably don't want to sell this for cash. You probably really want to sell this with seller financing of some sort and avoid this mess,
Well, you're making the IRS strategy become their reason, and then they're required to carry seller financing in order to accomplish this. Instead of you're saying, okay, Mitch, I'm going to pay you your price, but you got to take my terms, right? That's a much harder negotiation. And then the other thing about it is people say, well, why would I do all this? Right? The reason you're doing it is because you're getting the seller to carry financing terms that are way below market rates. And then all of a sudden, your ability to create cash flow out of these properties is drastically different. And there's people then, like the what ifers and what if this, what if values change and what if this, and it's like, that's why we have these classes, is that we go through, we take it way down the trail and we show you, what if this happened and where would you be and how would you position it and how could you safety yourself? And we just show them stuff that you know, Mitch, it's stuff that we've been studying on a long time. They
Yeah,
say
so
they say the hardest question, the first answer is never the right answer. You got to think through this stuff a little bit.
So I have a course called Private Money Changes Everything, and it was about raising private money. But the unique thing about the course was, first of all, it wasn't heavy, it wasn't bulky, it wasn't thick. It was just rich. You know, it was just, and it's probably the only seller financing course that I know of that has seller financing as the backdrop. Like, I'm in the business of seller financing to my buyers. Now I want to borrow some money from you. Let me show you how it works with seller financing as my business. Not being a landlord, not fixed and flipping, not, you know, those all have different things. I need longer terms, but I can offer longer cash flow, and I can offer great loan to value and all this stuff. Well, in that course, I have the 21 objections that I've ever heard. And so I have the 21 objections and then the answers to those objections based on the owner finance strategy. And I find when people have an objection and you can just come real easy, real smooth with the answer, they usually don't come back with anything else. I mean, they've like shot their bullet and that's it. And you came back with a logical answer. And so it's very important to know the answers to the objections in any negotiation in what you're talking about, so that it rolls off your tongue easily, you're confident, and you don't have to say, well, let me check on that and get back to you, because that's not a good way to negotiate. The answers to the objections are everything.
Yeah, and let me say this, Mitch, one of the strategies that I teach a lot is doing that strategy, what you're talking about, where you got a private investor first mortgage and the seller carries a second. So he doesn't carry all the financing. He maybe got 50% of the price of the property up front, but then he gets a second lien. Sometimes we split them into two notes. One of them has interest and one of them has no interest. One of them has payments, one of them has no payments. In other words, he's carrying almost a second lien and a third lien, right? Now I can wrap that and create a cash flow model that otherwise wouldn't work in today's market. So that's an example of what you're just describing is, if you could buy properties cheap enough, you can always go pay cash, buy it at a discount, get a private loan, and then do a wrap, right? As prices go up in value, all of a sudden that you start struggling with the math. And that's where I'm saying you can pay a different price depending on how you structure the terms. There's not a customer volume today problem, as I understand it. House buyers call flow is better than it's been in quite a long time. The problem is the customer is not in the mindset of, I'm willing to take a big discount, right? We've sort of trained them that the prices have gone up.
That's one of the first things we start asking questions to find out is what's this guy's button? If his button's price, then we can forget about all the other stuff. Once you determine that his button is, I'm going to get this number, you know, and that's my number. Okay, well, most people walk away at that point, right?
Yeah, and here's what I've learned, Mitch. Like, people always start out with these big demands. Virtually all sellers that say they're willing to seller finance, and you show them some tax strategy or some reason that's a big motivation, and then they start laying out what all their criteria is. Well, I'm willing to do it, but I've got to have 5% interest, or I'm willing to do it and I have to have 25% down, or like that's just all normal. Like, that's people, some guy that's new at creative financing, he thinks, oh my God, I've hit these big walls. Those walls are there every time you start the deal. But Mitch, let me tell you something. I can show you several hundred case studies of guys that we've coached that all started out with the sellers with these gigantic, this is what I want. And I can show you then the final deal that was negotiated. And every time the seller came off of it. Now, part of it is knowing some strategies of what to counter with, as you said, what to counter with in a way that's unique. Let me give you one simple example. A guy's stuck on interest rate. He's stuck on 5% interest. Yeah, I'll carry the terms, but I have to have 5% interest. And so what you then do is you then structure a step rate deal, and you say, I'm going to need you to work with me on the interest, But if you work with me, I'm willing to work with you. And I'll give you more than 5%. Now, Mitch, here's the deal. On the big principal amount, the most money, that's going to be a low rate, like 1 or 2%. Then as the principal goes down, we raise the rate. You're paying a higher interest, but on a lower principal amount, right? And then I can get to the point where on the very backside of the deal, I can pay him 6% interest. And you're thinking, Eddie, you're crazy. No, I know how the math works.
Yeah, that's okay. That's very ingenious, man. Is this stuff hard to implement or hard to get people to understand? I mean, or they hear you're going to give them the interest rate or even more, and all of a sudden they soften up.
Mitch, here's what I've learned. Most people that are making demands on interest they want to earn could not take a financial calculator and calculate the payment. So what they're stuck on is what they believe is a factor. They don't even know how much, they don't even know what that means to them. So one of the things I've done along the way is I built some pretty cool spreadsheets that allow you just to insert different numbers and different time frames, and it calculates the payment. It shows them, well, your payment can be this and your payment can be this. And as you said, a landlord was looking for a monthly check, not an invoice from the air conditioning company. And like, there's no expenses related to this check. You just actually get the check, right? And so all of a sudden I built some models. Like building the models would be kind of complex for a beginner to do, but it's fairly easy for them to follow the model I've already built, right? So I build some cool stuff and show them how it works. And then all of a sudden they're just sitting down with the customer and they're saying, look, first of all, right now, if you're trying to avoid taxes, this is not the time to charge the most interest, because that interest you collect is going to be subject to ordinary income. And so we'll structure a tax strategy offer that lets you, now you're doing all the disclaimers that you're not giving them tax advice and legal advice, and they got to go see whoever that is and stuff. But you're pointing out things to ask their advisor that they wouldn't know to ask them. And what we've learned is people wouldn't even know to bring it up, right? Their accountant doesn't call them and say, hey, you know, there's some cool tax strategy where you could like probably sidestep paying capital gains. They're like, what? Your accountant ever call and say that to you, Mitch?
No. I had to teach my accountant how to do all this stuff.
Hello, that's the real world, right?
I paid him so I could teach him how to do it.
That's my life experience too, and every other seasoned guy I know. So we're just showing them things that are not bogus. I mean, we verified this with the right kind of people with the right kind of license. So we're not saying something that's stupid or ridiculous. We're just pointing it out to them. But then all of a sudden, as we go down the road, we're showing them this is what you can get. And it relates back, Mitch, to what you said. When people bought a rental, what they were wanting were income. They weren't looking for a headache. They ended up with a headache, and they didn't get near as much income as they thought because they had surprise expenses. So you're just flipping the deal on them, saying you're going to get income with no headaches. And there's a cool strategy here that would probably allow you to sidestep this appreciation gain that you got on the property, this capital gain. Boom.
Yeah, that'll get their attention for sure. So I'm going to put you on the spot. You don't happen to have a copy of your book there, do you?
In front of me, I don't know that I did. I'm not like you. I don't have the whole thing, but I can't reach back there. I could go dig around and find one, but we'd have to probably take a coffee break.
No, we're good. We're good. So tell us the name of the book, and then I'm going to give a link here so you guys can get your hands on it and have an opportunity to go to one of these 3-day, what do you call it, a boot camp or a course or? Yeah,
we start out with just a free workshop and kind of explain some concept. If they want to progress down the road, they can figure that out if it's a fit for them. But we just want to give them something free. So the book is called the Moneyball book. So I copied kind of the idea of the movie, right? The Brad Pitt movie, Moneyball. And so, because if you think about it, that's what we're doing. We're using, it's real estate in a whole new way, right? And the idea is the Moneyball theory is that he went and made a team that made it the second lowest paid team in baseball. He kicked all the high price payers off the team and took guys statistically that were just as good, but weren't in the club somehow. And so that's what creative financing is. It's putting a deal together and stacking the structuring of the financing in such a way that your competition doesn't think about it. They don't know how to do it. If whoever acts on this, Mitch, there's going to be 30 people that don't act on it because the little voices are going to be going off in their head. This is too complicated. I can't do this. I don't know how, right? And so the guy listen, that never ran you off. You said, I'm going to do this. And I know for a very good fact, it has been really, 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 really good to you.
It has been good. What I loved about that Moneyball thing, and they just started picking people that got on base. They weren't setting records, but they got on base all the time, and they had statistics. If you can get on base, the chances of, getting to home plate was good. So we're going to learn how to get on base, which means get the interest of this guy and give him something, this seller, give him something to think about.
Yeah. And
tell him something they haven't ever thought about before. Get on base with this guy. And that also builds confidence. This guy's no dummy. This guy that's, if you're a seller and a person's speaking to you with this kind of intelligence, you got to say, I really think this guy's going to make the payments. He's too smart to screw this up. You know what I mean? He's got something going for him. He's studied. He knows what he's talking about.
And so what we've done, Mitch, is we've done what you described is what we've heard a lot of objections. And so we structure offers, and we when we get to a 3-day class, we do case studies. And sometimes, Mitch, the setup before I even get into the math of the case study, it might take 20 or 30 minutes. Because I'm describing what you're talking about. They had an objection. You got to move them past this and stuff. But we're explaining that we're digging through and showing people the objections that people have, and just sort of the fronts that they throw up, that's not really their objection. They just say that. You've seen that a million times, Mitch.
It's really important. You said you have to back up and go through 30 minutes of a backstory. And the reason why that's important is you've got to size up the personality of this guy, where he's from, how he thinks. Is he red, blue, yellow, green? Where is he at? How am I going to talk to him in his language? And it takes a long time to pull that out of a person. If Eddie or I or anybody else for that matter was just go out there and say, well, we offered him this much and he ended up taking that much, and then we made this much money, so what? The art of the deal was, how did you get there, and who was he, and what was his personality like, and how do you learn to recognize these things so that you can talk to a person in their own language and figure out where their hot button is and scrap everything else, and then try to deal within that parameter, and you'll have the guy's attention. So the backstory is huge.
It's the art of the deal. Like showing people, I mean, look, I have practiced structuring deals, whiteboarding out deals and ways to structure financing things. This is what I've practiced for 40 something years, right? So I don't expect somebody to show up and have the competency level of structuring deals that I do, because they just don't have the numbers behind them. When you've structured tens of thousands of deals, you can think at a faster pace. So we're pretty good at doing that, but structuring the deal that nobody else is willing to agree to is like ridiculous. It doesn't matter. You got to structure deals based on the story that the customer is telling you that says, okay, if we do this, this is what you get. This is what you could accomplish.
Yeah, a book that changed my life, Nothing Down by Robert Allen, was much like that, describing in detail the person and then where the chink in the armor was, or where the crack was that you're going to try to slide through. You know what I mean? And this is, I know you for a long time. You're a great storyteller. It makes it interesting. And all those experiences over all those years lets you see things that even a pretty savvy investor is not going to pick up, because you have years and years of experience. I try to explain that to my own students. If I'm doing a one-on-one, I said, just start talking to me and tell me what your conversation with this guy's like. And all of a sudden I'm starting to pick up, either this is the angle you go, or I think you have a con man here. I'm not even sure this guy owns the house. He's not answering the questions right. Let's check this guy out, So go to 1000houses.com/Eddie Speed. If you don't know how to spell it, just look right there in the corner off of Eddie's shoulder there. It's pretty easy. It's not hard to spell his name, so I'm not going to spell it out. 1000houses.com/Eddie Speed. You're going to get a free copy of the book Moneyball, and you're also going to be offered an opportunity to follow up on this and then get some real life case studies and some conversation with a man who's been there and done it. And where do you have these classes? Are they virtual, or are they?
You know what, Mitch, we're
city?
still virtual. We've made virtual work so well. We just have made it work. We think in that space we've become about as good at it as anybody has done it. We'd never done it before the virus, but we have gotten a very engaging class, and so they just come online and hang out with us. They're actually really live events. It's not fake live. It's real live. Yeah.
So the questions and everything people are asking and whatever, they're
in
real time. Yeah. I love the question and answer, because when you're speaking to an audience, the audience can come up with some pretty unique what ifs, and I always find that interesting. Now, sometimes those what ifs aren't going to happen, but a lot of times they do, or they could. So I like those kind of formats. I love it that you're virtual also, because it makes it easier for a person to get there. It
makes it easier for them to get there, and it makes it easier on my staff.
Yes.
And my team has been with me a long time. I don't have any newbies on my team, right? I think the lowest tenure we've got is probably 5 years. Highest tenure is probably 18, 20 years. So,
wow.
So my team has been loyal in helping our students, and they all actively do the business. So it lets them come Monday morning, go get back in the business, doing what we're teaching. And we really have become fired up about it. We've worked really hard at a lot of exercises that we do. So we're able to bring a lot of the students' business to the class, not just us being a talking head.
I love real life situations, because the problem with hypothetical case studies is that the tree branches can branch off so much you even forget what you're talking about. When you have a student with a real problem or a real case study, then all of a sudden the variables become finite. They're not infinite, they're finite. And you can figure out where the chess pieces are on the board. And now you can say, all right, if the battlefield looks like this, what are we going to do? And I love that, because real case studies are finite, and you can set the board. Anything else we need to mention before maybe we wrap it up, Eddie? Again, for you guys out there, 1000houses.com, Eddie Speed. That'll take, that 1000houses.com/Eddie Speed will take you over to the show notes. There'll be contact information. There'll be information, his virtual 3-day course, a way to click to get the book. So it's really kind of a one link does it all. It'll get you over to the show notes. Anything we need to address before we wrap it up?
One decision I think people need to make is, in a changing market, is creative financing a solution that would allow me to close more deals? If the answer is yes, then this is probably going to help you.
I don't see how it couldn't. Hell, I might join you myself, Eddie.
I wish you would.
That'd be great. Yeah. All right. This is Mitch Stephen with 1000houses.com. I've been on the line here with Eddie Speed. We're talking about morphing into the new situation. And there's always a new one right around the corner. So today we're headed into a situation. Nobody really has a crystal ball, but I think these strategies can't do anything but improve your chances and make you a more confident, more aggressive, and more successful buyer. It just makes sense. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself. I've been to seminars like this and spent bukus of money, and every single time I made my money back because I paid attention and then went out in the field and took action. But it always paid me. I never have really wasted any money on a high caliber person, because they always have something to bring to the table. And I'm open enough to say, okay, I got to change what I'm doing a little bit, and just kind of morph. So check it out, 1000houses.com/Eddie Speed. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, and thank you for doing all those downloads. You really make this podcast exciting and really get it out there. So I appreciate each and every one of you. All right, we're out of here, Eddie. Talk to you in a bit.
See you, pal.